One morning I woke up with images flooding into my head and I started painting. And what began to come out was remarkable for me. It was painting much closer to the way I painted as a child. It was painting in a very visceral way, in a very unintellectual way. As an illustrator for 35 years now, I was used to functioning as a social artist with a team of people working to produce a finished product that was the result of a group of people working together. And so the awareness of the audience was always part of that process, whereas painting for me was a very different experience. I've been painting since I was 2 or 3 years old, since finger paints, and it's always felt like the most natural thing in the world. It's always felt like this is the reason I'm alive, this is what I'm here to do. And so I never ever thought about other people when I painted. I never thought about any process. It was all about just letting things pour out from the center of my being. But when I started doing these new paintings, a thought came into my mind, which is that I can be aware of an audience without compromising the things that I love most, which is the thing that I think I breathe in color. I think color is the thing that exhilarates me more than anything else. And I realized that I could be aware of an audience and still do exactly what I love most as far as color and design and texture and all the elements, the abstract elements of painting. This one is called Eventide. I was thinking of it as evening, as the light of the evening, and I was also thinking of it in terms of the tide coming in. And I don't know where the idea for water came. It wasn't intellectual, it wasn't anything I planned. I just started putting colors down and this happened. And what I didn't realize at the time is that this piece, Eventide, would become a bridge to a whole series of paintings that I think is going to go on for a long time. This painting comes from memories of a remarkable evening in Pennsylvania where I was going out to dinner in the Poconos with a couple of my friends, and the light was simply amazing. There was a very heavy cloud cover that you can't see. You can just get a little bit of a sense of clouds up there. But as the sun was going down, the sun broke into a place near the horizon where there were no clouds. And so this brilliant golden sunlight was pouring across the landscape. And there were still places you could see that already were in shadow. The sun was way off to the right. And so there was this luminous quality to the water, which in contrast to the areas that are brilliantly lit was very, very dramatic. The idea of using oranges and yellows to show where the sun was hitting and blues and purples to show what was in shadow was about the feelings of warmth from the light, coolness from the shadow, and how the cool colors would vibrate when put next to the connected to Eventide. It's not yet as aware of the outside world as the ones to come would be. This is the second of those 3 evenings where the light was so remarkably dramatic. This was from Vermont looking out across Lake Champlain to the Adirondacks, and the same thing happened, but this time there was a very powerful storm coming in. And so I wanted to get the sense of movement, the sense of the storm coming from the right and going across. Actually, it was going from north to south. And I wanted to reflect that in these clouds as well. So there was a kind of turbulence. There was a kind of remarkably, I don't even know how to describe the emotions except to say they were down in the pit of my stomach. There was something ominous about this and something exciting about this approaching storm. At the same time, there was this amazingly luminous light in the sky that was being reflected in the water. I think what was happening to me as I started doing these paintings is that I began to connect more and more with the idea that I love water and I love reflections, and I wanted to continue exploring those things in this. Though when I finished this painting, I thought, you know what, there's something very peaceful in this as well. It isn't just this ominous feeling of an approaching storm, and so I decided, for the first time in many years, that I wanted to paint it again. And so I did a second painting where I was focusing on the stillness and the beauty of the scene, even though it was from memories of that same evening and that same scene. This is the second in that, I can't yet call it a series, although I think I may want to do more paintings of this as well. But in this painting, I wanted to try to eliminate the feelings of angst that I had in that first one. And I was conscious of making the water feel a little more still, have the colors be a little bit more jewel tones, a little more positive, so that the blues are a little bit bluer. There aren't many earth tones as there were in the first one. There's a lot of yellow ochre in the water in the first one. I decided to make this water feel cleaner and clearer, and the aqua is from memories of the way the water is in the Caribbean. I wanted a little bit of that feeling. This series is so exciting to me that this is really the first time in my life that I want to revisit the same scenes again and again, and I actually think that I'm even going to do a series of watercolors from the same scenes. And so this again is looking out across Lake Champlain from Burlington, Vermont, actually. This is a painting of a scene that's much closer to home. I used to live in Dobbs Ferry, which is on the Hudson River, about 45 minutes north of New York City. And I'd go down to the river in the evenings, and there were many remarkable sunsets. And I remember this one time where the sun was hidden behind the clouds, and yet, even though I couldn't see the sun, there was very clear reflections of the sun on the water. And so again, it was about using blue for shadow and orange and yellow and almost red in some places for the areas of light, and to revisit that remarkable scene on the Hudson River from that one evening when I was down there. The other thing that was amazing about living on the river was it almost changed minute to minute, so that if you're sitting there for several hours, you could have had 15 or 20 or 30 different paintings come out of that short period of time, because just sometimes when the wind changes, the water changes, and the sky changes, of course. Monet was the first one who taught me that if you're looking across a lit area where you see light and shadow, that if it's a tree with green leaves, and if you're actually seeing dark green leaves in shadow and light green leaves in the sunlit areas, that you can dramatize that with other colors. And so he was in many ways a mentor for me. And his ability to understand the essence of light and shadow and translate that into complementary color has had a profound influence on my paintings. And so I know, and you know when you look at this, that there really isn't a hill that's blue, and the water really isn't orange, but there's something about the way those two colors interact and vibrate. There's a kind of vibrato that happens when I always feel that the highest high I've ever gotten in my life happens when I find a color which feels perfect at the time, that when you sit it next to another color, vibrates the way two voices vibrate when they're in perfect harmony. And it actually, I can feel it in my body. There's something remarkable that happens when that experience comes through me and from me onto the canvas in painting, and that happened, of course, with this one. Well, this piece was very, very special to do. It was remarkable because, again, it was a single boat sitting there, probably with no one in it, there on the ocean by itself, and the experience of painting it was so remarkable for me that I realized I had to do another one. I had to make it bigger. And so I did a second painting in the same vein. There's something, and I again can't really explain why, but there's something very deeply emotional about what's happening in this piece. There's something about this boat that feels it feels almost thought-provoking. There's something going on here. There's not the kind of superficial level of communication. How can I explain this? I think in the finest of paintings that the sense of presence goes very deep. And that in the best case scenario, the sense of presence that the artist feels is communicated to the person who is watching the painting. And this one gave me some very, very deep emotional response. There's something about this, it doesn't feel happy to me. It doesn't feel sad to me. I can't even really put words to the emotion that it brings to me, except to say that, that I feel deeply moved by it. And I was so moved by it that I went, as soon as it finished, I started again. And I wasn't consciously thinking of how I was going to make the second one different, but I was just again going to start painting and see where it took me. Well, so this is the second of those, and I know that there's going to be at least one more, if not several more. When I started painting this, I was focused on this solitary boat sitting by itself on the ocean. And there was something about the composition that I hadn't thought about at all when I painted it. But there's almost a cross here. There's a very strong horizontal, about halfway from the top and the bottom, broken by a vertical, which is also right in the middle. And so there's something, I guess when you're studying classical composition, it's something you're told never to do, that there's supposed to be a certain proportion where things are, and I don't know why this happened, but on this painting, the composition went against all the things that I'd been taught when I was in college many years ago. But there's a kind of power, I think, that's come from that, from the directness, the simplicity of the design, and the power of the painting. And the other thing that I wanted to try to achieve, do you ever notice when you're looking directly at the sun, there's a kind of glow that comes around where it is? I tried to show that here. I wanted the sun to cut into the cloud a little bit, where there's just a tiny little bit of a reddish glow that's coming from the sun. And again, the sun is here, we all know that, even though we can't see it. And so I wanted the water to reflect the fact that where the water is, if you were swimming back over there, you'd actually be able to see the sun. And so I didn't really think about the greens in this one that weren't in the first one. I just knew that I had to keep painting it, and I know that I'm going to paint it again. There's so many things that we feel that we're unable to give words to. Like I know when I wake up in the morning from a dream, very often there are profound emotions that are coming from the dream that there are no words for. So years ago, I was commissioned by Harcourt Brace to do a picture book of the poem The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes. And the reason I wanted to do it is because it was one of my favorite poems as a kid. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the poem, it's really a poem about a superhero. It's about a guy who steals from the rich and gives to the poor, ends up being killed. And after I got the commission to do the painting, the book, I'm sorry, I struggled with how to show this guy. How could I make him as heroic as he was in my imagination? How could I make him as handsome and as swashbuckling? And I found that no matter how hard I tried, the images never came up to my imaginary image of this guy. And after 2 years of struggling with it, the thought came into my mind, I'm going to do him as a silhouette. And so I did the entire book where you never see the features of his face. He was all in black and in shadow. And that experience was very powerful, and without thinking about it, because this again was unconscious, I was repeating the same experience here. It's about how to allow the viewer to imagine things that aren't really spelled out in the image, and about how that way of working, of just showing something in silhouette, allows the viewer to imagine things that aren't seen. And I think that is at the essence of why I'm so drawn right now to these silhouettes.